Welcome to Work Interrupted Podcast.
Welcome to Work Interrupted with personal injury and disability attorney Brian Mittman. I'm your host today, Tracy Murda, and we're diving into the essentials New Yorkers need to know about workers' compensation law. Brian, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me here today, Tracy.
Well, let's get started. I want to talk about, first and foremost, what drew you to focus on workers' compensation law as one of your core practice areas? Why is that important to you?
That's a very good question. And part of it is accidental, no pun intended on accidents, but part of it is accidental because I was working for a personal injury law firm while I was in law school and decided I wasn't really digging the particular place I was working. And I was having dinner with my father-in-law and I mentioned it and he said, come work for me and see what it's like. He had a workers' compensation practice since about 1933. It was his father's before it. And I started doing it and I realized that there was something there. As a kid, all the way up until law school, I had almost 14 different jobs. So I've done a lot of different things and seen a lot of things, and being able to help people make a living and make a difference is really the most important thing.
Excellent. Well, I guess we should probably start with talking about what exactly is workers' compensation law in New York anyway? What's sort of the purpose and how does it function in New York?
Well, workers' compensation, the law, originally workmen's compensation, is really the first social legislation out there. It was that first progressive legislation that existed to try to help people. In New York, it was originally passed in 1911, and the day before the most tragic fire, the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire, factory fire here in New York, the day before that fire, the highest court, the Court of Appeals, struck it down as unconstitutional. But by 1914, they had found a way to make it constitutional. And since 1914, this law has provided guaranteed wage loss and medical payments to injured workers in exchange for the employer providing the insurance coverage and not being able to be sued. So it was out there to encourage employers to have safer workplaces, and they knew what type of expenses they would have. And it was there to help injured workers to know that if they've worked hard and something happened, they would get some type of coverage and they wouldn't have to go through the crazy legal system.
What an interesting history lesson. That's incredible information. So, Brian, what would you say are some of the most common workplace injuries that you see in some of those cases that your firm handles? What are the causes behind them?
That's, again, another wonderful question. What are the most common injuries? The thing about workers' compensation is it reflects life, right? We work. Things happen. People are people. Disabilities happen. Injuries happen. And it can be almost any body part. But the majority of what we see are a lot of back and neck injuries from lifting or from falls or motor vehicle accidents. We see a lot of broken bones, lots of broken arms, broken legs, messed up knees, bad shoulders. Periodically, we also see a lot of head injuries, concussions, as well as traumatic brain injuries. And then there's a whole slew of kind of anything else you can think of that could be caused by being exposed to something at work or falling or getting hit or something crazy. Unfortunately, we also see a lot of amputations because there's machinery out there and accidents happen. So that's really a lot of what we see, a lot of those orthopedic injuries and things like that. But at the same time, it could be almost anything.
So, Brian, what is important, or what do you want our listeners to know about their legal rights?
Again, Tracy, that's another great question. Most people don't know what their legal rights are until they need to find out what their legal rights are. The old joke is, everyone doesn't like an attorney until they need to hire an attorney. So, the most important thing is really, what is this benefit? This is an insurance benefit. So this is almost like having health insurance or life insurance or car insurance. This is an insurance that your employer must have for you in New York. And it's supposed to pay you a lost wage benefit. So if you're out of work because of the injury, then you get some type of weekly payment until you can get back to work. And if you end up with a permanent injury, maybe some money at the end of the case, as well as medical care. And the most important thing is nothing's guaranteed. Even though they claim it's guaranteed, insurance companies, business interests they'll fight. They make their money by saving pennies, whereas you, the injured worker, needs every penny that you can get. So it becomes has become a very complicated type of program. I tell people they've complexified it, right? They've taken something that is fairly simple and added a lot of hoops. So you could do it on your own, and in some circumstances, there's no reason to have an attorney or to not think that the system will work for you. But in most cases, it's a lot more complicated than it seems. It's kind of like, I don't know, it's like riding your bike, right? It takes a while. Once you learn how to do it, it's not a big deal, but you don't want to really learn how to do it while you're trying to figure out how to pay your rent, feed the kids, get the medical care that you need.
Absolutely. Brian, walk me through a timeline of a typical workers' comp case, and what does that journey look like?
The typical timeline for a workers' compensation case is not very what I call linear. So there are concepts in the law in general. You get arrested for something. There's kind of a very long, flat line about what's going to happen. You're going to get arrested. You're going to get arraigned. You're going to have a pre-hearing conference. You're going to come back for pre-hearing motions. You're then going to pick a jury, have a trial, and it's over. Same thing with a lawsuit. You get hit by a city bus, you go get medical care, you bring a lawsuit against the city. There's what's called discovery, where they gather up all the information. There's depositions, examinations before trial, pretrial motions. Then there's picking a jury, a trial, and a conclusion. Workers' compensation, unfortunately, is more like the game of chutes and ladders, where you start on the path and you can move along and go up the ladder and go along the spaces, and then you have something happens and you slide back down the slide and you start all over again. So what happens, and the most important thing, is that if you have been injured on the job or you realize that your condition is related to work, seek medical care immediately, notify your employer, and then you have to file a claim, even if the insurance company or your employer has told the workers' compensation court system, hey, there's an accident, there was an injury. Those are the beginning steps. On a timeline basis, though, if you got hurt today, technically there's a 7-day waiting period, meaning that you don't get any lost wages until you've been out of work at least 7 days. And then once you're out of work for 14 days, they go all the way back to day one. And the case itself is going to really take as long as it takes you to heal and get back to work, or to be found to have a permanent injury. I've had cases that have taken 9 months, and I've had cases that have taken more than 9 years, because so many things are continuously going on and we have to come back to it and relitigate, and we can talk about that later, all the little ins and outs where it kind of is never ending. I'd say the typical case, though, that's probably somewhere between a year to 2 years would be a typical case.
Is it safe to say that oftentimes these claims are denied right from the get-go?
That's another good question. So, again, it's a comparison. So in the world of Social Security disability, which is another area we practice, 85% of all cases are denied at the first step. In lawsuits, the reason you have a lawsuit is because the insurance company is disputing your right to get money or the amount of money you should get, or if they should even pay. In a workers' compensation case, I would say that about maybe 10% of all the cases that are filed are contested or disputed or controverted, is the legal term they use, at the very beginning. Those are cases where they say, you weren't hurt while you were working, you're lying, whatever it might be. But the majority of the cases, they acknowledge, oh my God, you had an accident, we're going to start paying you, we're going to start paying your doctor. But this is that whole chutes and ladders situation I discussed. It's great. They accepted the case. They're paying me while I'm out of work. You now go see an independent medical examiner for the insurance company. And by the way, they're not independent, and they're oftentimes not medical examiners. I think the youngest one I took recently, his testimony, he was about 85 years old. But once that happens, then they start doing things like paying you less money and not approving treatment. And now you have to start fighting for all of that stuff. And that's why some of these cases take so long. You just want to get some more physical therapy. And now I have to take the testimony of your doctor, the insurance doctor. Then we have to go in front of the judge just to get you 18 more sessions of physical therapy. So that's what we mean by dispute. There's the beginning part where they're claiming no accident. You were at home when you got hurt. You weren't at work. And then there are these situations where they just don't want to pay you. They want to pay you less, or they don't want to pay for medical care.
That's really interesting. So I can see where, workers get confused, because if you're getting, your workers' comp claim is going through and it's been approved, you're thinking I'm home safe. Now I have no other problems. But it's interesting, that extra layer of, disputes and fighting for your rights that, you were just talking about.
Yeah, it's become a big problem within the entire system. In order for a doctor in New York to treat a workers' compensation patient, that doctor has to be coded by the Workers' Compensation Board, meaning that they had to basically get permission and get licensed by the board. The Workers' Compensation Board has added a whole new layer of what they thought was going to be efficiency. Hey, doctors, use this special medical portal, make all your requests through the medical portal, and we'll get you the treatment you need for your patients. Unfortunately, they have made it so complicated, many doctors are just dropping out of the system. So now you just want to get medical care, and we struggle sometimes to find you a doctor who's even going to be able to provide that for you.
So what are the reasons or the tactics that these insurance companies are using to limit claims or limit medical care?
So kind of the reasons, the tactics, so I like to call them the tricks that they use are many. And I think people have to understand, it doesn't seem like a big deal that you just need, as I said, 10 more sessions of therapy. That actually would cost maybe $300-400, right? You got to remember, the insurance companies have tens of thousands of claims. So if they can save $50 a case, they're literally saving millions of dollars. So what they'll do is it's delay, delay, delay. That's one of the biggest tactics that they use. The insurance company's attorneys will come in and they will raise disputes and say, this isn't part of the law. This shouldn't be authorized. Our doctor has said something else. And then they will fight that, because finally somebody might give up and say, oh, it's not worth it. I want to be done with this. I'm already back to work. Why am I fighting for this medical care? I'll just go do the therapy at home or something like that. Another tactic they use are these, as I mentioned before, independent medical exams. I like to call them defense medical reports. The insurance company hires a doctor. That doctor examines you and gives a report about how disabled she thinks you are and what work she thinks you can do. Interestingly enough, many of these doctors are retired, and that's all they do. They make $500,000, $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 an exam, and they will literally do dozens of exams a day. You will go in for a 10-minute exam if you're lucky, and they will give you a 9-page report that's denying you all this treatment and all these different things. So that's another tactic that they use that's really underhanded.
Wow. That's the first time I've ever heard of that. That's incredibly important information for our listeners. Brian, would you say there are any cases that really sort of stuck with you or, stuck out to you where you were able to secure a favorable outcome for your clients when it didn't look like that was going to be the case?
I've handled a lot of cases. There's some funny ones, some not so funny ones, but there are a few that have really, really stood out. There is a death benefit. So if somebody's killed on the job, there's a specific type of death claim and death benefit that is allowed for either the family or the surviving spouse or children. And I had a kind of a crazy case one time where our gentleman had fallen off of a scaffold and died. And it turned out he had 9 children from 3 different women. And it took a while, but I was actually able to get all 3 mothers together and be able to work out a deal. So basically the children got the benefits that they deserved. And that was really rewarding, because oftentimes, especially when you're dealing with a death claim, there's a lot of contention that comes out, a lot of fighting that comes out after the fact. And we're not talking about millions and millions of dollars, but we're talking about money that could make a difference. The breadwinner has all of a sudden stopped winning bread. They've died. So that's been that was a very rewarding case, as well as another one that I always recall is the paralyzed construction worker. This construction worker was actually an engineer on the site, was in one of those construction sheds doing something, and part of a crane fell on the construction site, crushed the shed and paralyzed him. So this person went from being an incredibly active person to being paralyzed. And even though there was a big lawsuit on the other side against the crane company, while that lawsuit was winding its way through the courts for years, we were able to secure the injured worker guaranteed weekly benefits for life as well as medical care. And one day when there were newspapers, I opened up the newspaper and I was reading an article about a guy who was using some type of robotic walker. And I looked and it was my client. I was like, wow. He had gotten into a special program and was even trying to walk again. So, things like that, being able to make a difference where you can help people out while, they're going through the physical and the emotional impact of accidents is really the most rewarding thing.
Would you say, what are some experiences that you've had of handling workers' compensation cases that really show, how you benefit your clients? What can you do for them, maybe is a better way to say it, that perhaps another attorney can't?
Well, one of the things we always like to tell people is that we really are the choice for all injury and disability legal needs. We have been doing this since 1933, so experience does matter. I like to say it's in my DNA. We have had such experience and seen so many things that while we could easily handle and assess a situation, this way you as the injured worker, you have peace of mind. You don't have to worry about, is your attorney good enough or do they really know what they're doing? We have deep relationships with defense attorneys and insurance companies over the years. The ins and outs of the Workers' Compensation Board, former chairman of the Workers' Compensation Alliance, which is a political action committee where we lobby in Albany, New York to get better laws passed for injured workers. So we have a lot of that going on, as well as, the reality that we're constantly learning. We try to, I think we have created a way of communicating with our clients that is respectful and very non-legalese, very, plain and simple so that anybody can understand what the process is and to help you along with that. And that's really what we do. So, that's our focus and that's how we roll, as they say.
Well, I just want to thank you, Brian. This was incredibly insightful. I think we've got a lot of great information that we've shared with the listeners here. I want to thank everyone else, too, for tuning in to Work Interrupted with experienced injury and disability attorney Brian Mittman. For more information or to connect with Brian, you can visit disabilityguys.com or find them on social media. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments. Thank you so much, Brian. It's been a pleasure.
My pleasure, Tracy. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.